Elvis loved jewelry, we all.
50 years after his death, Elvis Presley's personal jewelry box has finally been opened, revealing the glittering rings, chains, and pendants that once defined his iconic style. But one ring is mysteriously missing without a trace. How did it disappear? And could it still be hiding somewhere today? Join us as we uncover the mystery of Elvis's prized accessories. The King of Jewelry. Right. Before we get to the King's missing rings, let's talk about who Elvis is and why his missing accessories matter. Before we continue, did you know that Elvis had a deep fondness for jewelry? Elvis had already transformed from a rising rock and roll star into a global icon at the end of the 60s. Alongside the music, something else was growing in the background: his jewelry collection. He was becoming known for his love of bold, heavy, and deeply symbolic jewelry. We're not just talking chains and watches, but rings. Large, custom-made rings that came to signify his name and charisma. This trend became more noticeable after his return to live performances in 1968. That comeback period did not just revive his career, it also introduced a new version of Elvis, one that was more confident, more expressive, and more deliberate about the image he projected. Jewelry became part of that image. In fact, it became his signature. At the center Elvis's era was a catchphrase: taking care of business. From that phrase came the famous TCB symbol, often designed with a lightning bolt. This insignia became a code, a message, and a bond between Elvis and the people around him. Soon that symbol began to appear on rings, necklaces, and other custom pieces he personally commissioned. These pieces were not mass-produced. They were carefully designed, most times in collaboration with his trusted jeweler in Memphis. Some rings featured large diamonds set in gold, with the letters T, C, and B embedded directly into the design. Others carried unique shapes, like lion heads or musical symbols. Every sign had a meaning, a mood, a part of the singer who wore it. The scale was impossible to ignore. These rings were diamonds weighing huge carats. They were expensive. One of his early TCB rings alone was said to cost tens of thousands of dollars at the time, a staggering amount when adjusted for modern value. Still, there was always a new one getting shipped straight from the jeweler. Certain rings were used longer than others. Some were tied to important periods in his life. One of the later TCB rings, more elaborate and dramatic in design, became so closely associated with his image that it is now preserved and displayed as part of his legacy. Nevertheless, all his rings barely stayed in his keep, even while he was alive. Did they have a mind of their own, or was someone responsible? Let's get to business. Elvis's jewelry collection. When Elvis Presley died in August 1977, the sudden absence he left behind was as emotional as it was physical. His home, his rooms, his closets, and his personal belongings all remained exactly where he had left them. And inside that stillness sat a collection of valuables that no longer had an owner. At Graceland, the responsibility of handling everything he'd left behind fell primarily to his father, Vernon Presley. He became the executor of the estate, tasked with sorting through a lifetime of possessions that had never been carefully cataloged. This was no neat archive. It was a personal world of personal items. Among these belongings were pieces of jewelry that Elvis had kept close in his later years. Rings, chains, pendants, and watches were found in drawers, on dressers, and inside small storage cases. Some were familiar, recognized from photographs or performances. Others had never been seen publicly, making their origins less clear. The idea of a jewelry box begins here. It's not necessarily a single object holding Elvis's most expensive trinket. It's more of a quiet collection of items gathered from different corners of his private space. What made this process complicated was the nature of Elvis's estate itself. In the years immediately after his death, there were financial pressures, legal responsibilities, and decisions that had to be made quickly. Certain items were preserved because they were clearly tied to his public image. Stage-worn pieces and recognizable accessories were treated as part of his legacy and kept within Graceland's growing archive, not all of them. Some belongings were distributed among family members. Personal items moved into private hands as keepsakes. Others were set aside without immediate plans, stored in boxes and containers that would not be reopened for years. At that moment, there was no sense that every piece needed to be documented for history. They were much more focused on surviving the tragedy that came with Elvis's death. As time moved forward, Graceland itself began to change. By the early 1980s, it was open to the public as a museum, transforming from a private home into a place of memory and tourism. The items displayed there were carefully selected, chosen to represent Elvis' life as perfectly as possible. Jewelry played a role in this presentation, but only a portion of what he once owned was ever shown.
Well, what did I do for Elvis? I made a lot of jewelry for Elvis.
That's because so much remained unseen. Storage areas were culprits, sporting many more items that had not been cataloged. And as curators and archivists worked to better understand the scope of what Elvis had left behind, they saw the leak. In the decades that followed, something unusual began to happen. Items connected to Elvis started to reappear. Auction houses began to receive pieces with claimed links to him. Rings, necklaces, and other valuables surfaced with stories attached, sometimes supported by documentation, sometimes relying on personal accounts. Each appearance raised new questions about how these items had traveled from Elvis's possession into the hands of collectors. This slow resurfacing seemed to create a pattern. Elvis's belongings were not lost in a single moment. They were scattered over time, moving through different people and places, sometimes returning to the spotlight long after they had been forgotten. Within that pattern, the idea of something missing becomes more than speculation. It becomes a full-blown case needing investigation. Stay with us as we dive deeper into this topic: why Elvis's jewelry was always disappearing. To understand why so many of Elvis Presley's jewelry pieces cannot be accounted for today, the story has to move away from storage rooms and estates and into something far more personal, more habitual. We mean the way he treated people around him. This matters because Elvis's jewelries were disappearing even before his death. Elvis did not treat wealth the way most people do. By the time he reached the peak of his career, money and valuables were no longer things he held onto tightly. Instead, they became tools for connection. And jewelry, more than anything else, became his preferred way of expressing that connection. It happened in a whim. Someone would be in the room with him, a friend, a band member, or someone visiting for the first time. Elvis would notice something about them, remark on their attitude, or just be impressed by a good moment. And then, almost instinctively, he would reach for one of his rings, take it off, and give the person. Those who were close to him saw this happen again and again. Members of his inner circle, often referred to as the Memphis Mafia, became some of the most frequent recipients. These were the men who traveled with him, worked with him, and spent long hours in his company. To Elvis, they were not just employees, they were family. So, of course, they shared jewelries with him. What makes this behavior so stunning is the value of what he gave away. These were not small tokens. Many of the rings he wore were custom-made, featuring diamonds set in gold, designed specifically for him. Some carried personal symbols, like the TCB emblem. Others reflected particular moments in his life or career. The materials themselves were valuable. How much more could you get from that when the king's own signature was printed on it? With jewelry constantly entering Elvis's collection through commissions and purchases, you'd think his room was a chest of trinkets. Turns out it was also constantly leaving through acts of generosity. There was no fixed number, no stable inventory, simply no way of telling how many were bought and how many more were given away. There are documented accounts of Elvis giving jewelry to acquaintances, to people he met briefly, even to strangers who made an impression on him. A conversation, a shared moment, or a simple feeling of goodwill could end with someone walking away, wearing a piece that once belonged to one of the most famous men in the world. It wasn't for publicity. Many of these exchanges happened in private settings and are only remembered by private accounts from witnesses. As the years passed, the impact of this habit became more visible. Pieces that had once been part of his daily life began to appear in unexpected places. Some remained with their recipients for decades, kept as personal mementos. Others eventually entered the market, sold through dealers or auction houses, sometimes accompanied by documentation, other times relying only on personal testimony. Each time one of these items surfaced, it added another layer to the growing picture of how widely his belongings had spread. But it also introduced uncertainty. For instance, not every piece came with clear proof, not every story could be verified. And as ownership changed hands over time, the original context behind many items became harder to trace. When historians did trace the leaks, what they found was something more than generosity. Keep watching to know what else was responsible for Elvis's missing jewelry. Missing for over 50 years. After Elvis Presley's death, it seemed as though the story of his personal belongings had already been written. The items displayed at Graceland became the accepted version of what remained. Fans walked through rooms, looked at carefully arranged artifacts, and believed they were seeing the most complete picture available. Little did they know that another piece of history was brewing. It involved Colonel Tom Parker, the man who had managed Elvis for most of his career. Their relationship had always been complex, built on trust, business, and a long history of shared success. Over time, Elvis had given Parker not just professional authority, but also personal items, including valuable pieces of jewelry. Some of these items were gifts. Others were tied to financial dealings between them. By the later years of Elvis' life, Parker had come into possession of a notable number of personal belongings that were never part of the collection at Graceland. When Elvis died in 1977, those items did not return to the family. Instead, they remained with Parker. It stayed that way for decades. Very little was said about what he held. The public narrative focused on Graceland, on the estate, on what could be seen and documented. After Parker's own death in 1997, his estate faced financial pressures that led to decisions about selling off assets. Among those assets were the items connected to Elvis. But even then, the process was not immediate. The collection did not suddenly appear all at once. It moved slowly, passing through private channels before reaching the broader market. When pieces finally began to surface, the reaction was immediate. Auction houses and collectors were faced with items that had not been seen for years. Rings, pendants, and other jewelry linked directly to Elvis were now being presented with documented connections to Parker. These were not casual finds. They were part of a larger, previously hidden group that had remained out of sight for nearly half a century. What a groundbreaking moment. It was proof that Elvis's collection was still abroad, undocumented, and incomplete. Historians and fans had worked with a limited view, assuming that most of what remained was already accounted for. But the reappearance of these pieces showed that entire sections of his personal belongings had been separated early and held elsewhere, outside the reach of the main estate. If a collection of this size could remain hidden for so long, then it raised a new question about everything else. What other items had followed similar paths? What else had been given, traded, or stored in places that were never documented? What other piece of Elvis' legacy was still yet to be acknowledged? The fact that this discovery was 50 years after Elvis was chilling. It unearthed the old issue of cataloging jewelries. Try as they might, there was just so much to account for, and many more that would most likely never be accounted for. This collection is precious, not just because it waited 50 years to finally be discovered. It's because of its authenticity. A man like Colonel Tom was family to Elvis. He was sure to receive his share of the jewelry. There was no question of the originality of the rings. They were real, and after a long time, they had finally been returned to their rightful owner. Speaking of owners, some jewelry collectors were not the rightful owners of Elvis's trinkets. In fact, some had taken it without being given. Theft, mystery, and vanishing pieces. Not every missing piece in Elvis Presley's story can be explained by generosity or quiet separation. Some disappearances came with force, with intent, and with a trail that led straight into crime. And once that enters the picture, the story shifts from personal habit to something far more unsettling. By the early 2000s, Elvis had already become more than a memory. His legacy had grown into a global attraction, with Graceland standing as one of the most visited private homes in the United States. Millions of people came each year, not just to see where he lived, but to stand close to objects that once belonged to him. Among those objects were pieces of jewelry. Rings, watches, and other personal items had become part of carefully curated exhibitions, sometimes housed within Graceland itself, and sometimes displayed in traveling or affiliated collections. These pieces were no longer just valuables. They were artifacts, carrying both financial worth and historical meaning. That combination made them targets. In 2004, one of the most significant thefts connected to Elvis memorabilia took place. A collection of his personal jewelry was stolen from an exhibition space, sending shock through both the collector community and the public. The items taken were not random. They included rings and other pieces directly linked to Elvis, objects that could not easily be replaced or replicated. What made it stand out was the nature of the items themselves. Unlike ordinary valuables, Elvis's jewelry is instantly recognizable to those who study his life. The designs, the craftsmanship, and in some cases, the wear patterns all carry identifying features. Selling such items openly would be difficult without raising questions. And yet, they were taken anyway. Investigations followed, and while some efforts were made to trace the stolen pieces, not all of them were recovered. This left a gap that still exists today. Certain items that were once publicly displayed simply vanished, their current location unknown. At this point, it's easy to imagine that they'll never be recovered. Many of his rings were made with valuable stones, diamonds, gold, and other materials that hold intrinsic value beyond their connection to him. In a worst-case scenario, a piece could be dismantled, its components separated and sold individually, erasing the original form that tied it to Elvis. For now, there is no public record confirming that this has happened to any specific item, but the possibility remains part of the broader risk that surrounds stolen jewelry. Over the years, collectors and historians have noted gaps between what is known to have existed and what can currently be accounted for. Photographs, performance footage, and personal records show Elvis wearing certain pieces that have never resurfaced in auctions, exhibitions, or private collections. These are not items known to have been gifted or officially transferred. They simply fade out of the visible record. In some cases, this could be explained by private ownership. A piece might be held by someone who chooses not to sell or display it, keeping it as a personal treasure. In others, the trail may have been lost over time, with ownership passing through multiple hands without clear documentation. But when theft is part of the history, those gaps take on a different tone. The 2004 incident is a reminder that Elvis's belongings have not always been protected by the reverence people associate with his name. They exist in the real world, subject to the same risks as any other valuable object. Security systems can fail. Opportunities can be exploited, and once something is gone, recovering it is never guaranteed. It is no longer just about personal choices or hidden collections. It introduces the possibility that some items left their place through deliberate and illegal actions. Actions that left behind no clear path, only absence. And that absence can remain for years, even decades, who knows. This might not be the last of the case of Elvis's missing jewelries we'll hear. Like Parker's collection, a heavy diamond ring or a simple gold bracelet could be sitting in a secret jewel case, waiting for the day the world finds it. Stay tuned, we're just getting to the intriguing part, the missing ring. By the time the story reaches this point, the absence of a single ring no longer feels simple. It fits a puzzle of everything that came before it: the movement, separation, generosity, and even theft. And yet, the truth is that no single explanation can fully account for it. Because when it comes to Elvis Presley, there was never just one way things left his possession. To understand what could have happened to a missing ring, the timeline has to be stretched backward, not to the moment a collection was opened, but to the years when Elvis was still alive, still active, still making decisions that were rarely documented in detail. He did not live in a system of careful record-keeping. Jewelry came into his life through custom orders, gifts, and purchases made during tours or private visits. It moved through different spaces. We're talking a lot of spaces, from his home at Graceland to hotel rooms, dressing areas, and private gatherings. It was worn, removed, replaced, and sometimes left behind without urgency. In that kind of environment, a ring did not need a dramatic backstory. It was just too easy to be lost, forgotten, or taken. It could have been taken off after a performance and set down in a place where it was later moved or misplaced. It could have been packed among other belongings during travel, only to be separated from the rest over time. These are ordinary moments, but in a life as active and fluid as his, they carried long-term consequences. Then there is the possibility that the ring left his possession intentionally, but without becoming part of any known story. Elvis gave away jewelry often, but not every gift was remembered or recorded by others. Some recipients may have kept those moments private. Others may not have fully understood the long-term significance of what they received. Over decades, such a piece could pass through generations or be sold without its origin being fully recognized. In that case, the ring would not be lost in the traditional sense. It would simply exist outside the known narrative, moving through time without a clear link back to Elvis. another path leads through the network of people around him. His inner circle included friends, employees, and associates who had varying levels of access to his personal space. Items could be borrowed, handled, or temporarily held by others. While there is no confirmed record of a specific missing ring being taken in this way, the possibility exists within the broader pattern of how his belongings were managed. After his death, that network widened. His estate passed through the hands of family members, legal representatives, and individuals connected to his career. Some items were carefully preserved, others were stored, relocated, or transferred in ways that were not always fully documented. In such transitions, smaller objects like rings are particularly vulnerable to being overlooked or separated from their original context.
And I want people, fans, people who love it, know that it is authentic. There's so much product out there that is not authentic.
This leads into another possibility. It's the possibility of delayed discovery. History has already shown that items connected to Elvis can remain out of sight for decades before reappearing. Collections once held by Colonel Tom Parker only returned to public awareness many years later, revealing how easily entire groups of belongings could exist beyond the known record. A missing ring could follow the same pattern. It might be in a private collection, held by someone who has no immediate reason to bring it forward. It could be stored among other items, its significance unrecognized until a future moment brings attention to it. In that sense, absence does not always mean finality. It can simply mean that the timeline has not yet caught up. There is the possibility that cannot be ignored. The ring might have been lost without a trace. Not stolen in a documented event, and definitely not given in a memorable moment, but simply gone through circumstances that were never recorded. A careless toss, a forgotten delivery. Time has a way of smoothing over small details, especially when those details were not seen as important in the moment they occurred. In a life filled with movement, people, and constant change, even something valuable could slip away without creating a clear memory of how it happened. What makes this question difficult is that each of these possibilities fits within the known patterns of Elvis's life. None of them require an unusual explanation. Each one aligns with how his belongings were handled, both during his lifetime and after. So the missing ring does not point to a single answer. It opens a space where several paths remain equally believable, each supported by real events, real habits, and real gaps in the historical record. That is what keeps the mystery alive, because the ring is not just an object that cannot be found. It is a piece that could still exist somewhere beyond the edges of what is currently known. It could be waiting for the moment when its story finally reconnects with the man who once wore it. It could be found at this very moment. Keep viewing so you don't miss something important in this story. Why Elvis's jewelry still haunts collectors and fans today. Long after his voice faded from live stages, Elvis Presley continues to appear in places no one fully expects, not through recordings or old footage, but through objects. Rings, chains, and personal pieces that surface quietly, sometimes decades after they were last seen, carrying with them fragments of a life that never stayed still. What makes his jewelry different from most celebrity memorabilia is not just its value, it is the sense that the story is unfinished. At Graceland, visitors walk through rooms that feel carefully preserved, almost frozen in time. Display cases hold selected pieces of jewelry, chosen to represent different moments in Elvis's life. These items feel stable, documented, and complete. But outside those walls, the picture becomes far less certain. Auction houses have played a major role in revealing that uncertainty. Over the years, items linked to Elvis have appeared for sale with increasing frequency. Some arrive with detailed documentation, tracing their journey from his possession through specific individuals. Others come with lighter histories, relying on personal accounts that require careful verification. Each appearance creates a ripple, drawing attention not just to the item itself, but to the path it must have taken to get there. For collectors, this creates a unique kind of pursuit. Owning a piece of Elvis is not just about acquiring something valuable, it is about holding a connection to a moment that may not exist anywhere else. A ring that was worn during a particular period. A pendant that reflects a personal belief, a design that links back to a specific phase in his life. These objects become anchors, tying the present to a past that still feels alive. However, that connection comes with uncertainty. This is because every time a new piece surfaces, it raises a quiet question about what has not yet appeared. The known collection continues to grow, but it never feels complete. There is always the sense that something remains out of reach, something that has not yet entered the public record. This is where the idea of haunting begins to take shape. As humans, we have it in us to feel the intrigue in every little mystery. The possibility of Elvis's jewelries being so close or so out of reach, hidden somewhere or lost forever, are simply fascinating. It moves fans, not in a dramatic sense, but in the way these objects continue to move through time, appearing and disappearing, reshaping what people believe they understand about Elvis's life. A ring can sit in private hands for decades, unseen and unspoken about, only to emerge suddenly and change the narrative around a particular period of his life. And when that happens, it does more than add to the collection. It reopens questions. Where was it all this time? Who held it, and why did it remain hidden? If this piece could stay out of sight for so long, just imagine what else might still be waiting. This pattern has repeated itself enough to become part of the larger story. Items once thought lost have returned. Others have been confirmed to exist only through photographs or records, without ever appearing physically again. The gap between what is known and what is possible continues to stretch. It's a bigger story for historians. It creates an ongoing challenge. Documenting Elvis belongings is not a finished task. It is a process that evolves as new information appears. Each rediscovered item requires careful examination, not just of its authenticity, but of its place within the broader timeline of his life. The work is never complete, because the material itself is still in motion. As for the fans, the experience is more emotional. There is something powerful about knowing that pieces of Elvis' life are still out there, moving quietly through the world. It makes his story feel less distant, less confined to the past. The idea that a personal object could appear after so many years adds a sense of immediacy, as if the connection to him has not been fully closed. And within that feeling, the mystery of a missing ring takes on a deeper meaning. It is no longer just about locating a single object. It becomes part of a larger pattern, one where absence does not end the story. Instead, it extends it. The missing piece becomes a possibility rather than a conclusion, something that could still emerge. It can still be recognized. It can still find its way back into the narrative. The tale of Elvis and his valuable rings go on because history has already shown that Elvis belongings do not always stay where people expect them to be. In fact, they could be right under our noses. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.